At 3 a.m., the air on the docks was a mix of diesel, salt, and something colder, the smell of a lie. I was standing in front of my stall, with ice melt and fish blood under my boots, holding a delicate pearl earring that didn't belong here. It lay still in my rough palm, its pearly sheen seeming to mock the fish scales I could never quite scrub from my hands. It wasn't my wife Jessica's. Her jewelry box only held flashy costume pieces to show off at charity luncheons. This earring was real, still warm from another woman's skin. I didn't throw it into the harbor or take it home. I dropped it into a metal tackle box, snapping the lid shut with a click that seemed to seal something for good. I knew my marriage, like last night's unsold fish, was already rotting from the inside. But I didn't say a word. On the docks, the smartest hunter never alerts his prey. The next morning, I handed the old SUV that Jessica sometimes used for shopping, along with the keys, to Tom, my most trusted employee. "Tom, the truck is yours. Consider it a bonus," I said. "But it's a little dirty. You better give it a good cleaning, inside and out, especially under the floor mats." Tom was ecstatic. I watched him drive away in that vehicle loaded with secrets while I climbed into my noisy old work truck that was only good for hauling fish and headed home. In that moment, I knew the cleanup had begun. At the Port Charlotte Seafood Market, I, Owen Miller, have a nickname, the King of the Wharf. It's not an exaggeration. I started working at the market when I was 15, and now, at 45, I own several of the largest wholesale stalls, plus a medium-sized fishing boat called the Pearl, named after my daughter. I'm not particularly tall, but I'm built solid, with leathery tanned skin from years of working by the sea. My hands are calloused and covered in small scars from handling seafood, with grime under the nails that's impossible to remove. People always say my eyes are special, sharp as if they could spot a fish 10 feet under the water. I don't usually say much, but when it comes to seafood and business, my words are precise and carry weight. Nobody knows seafood better than I do, from the color of a fish's gills to the firmness of a shrimp's shell. My judgment is almost never wrong. With these hands and these eyes, I went from being a small-time vendor to a pillar of the entire market. I have my own philosophy of the wharf. Stay calm, see things for what they are, be honest in business, and be cold in your decisions. But my wife Jessica, who was once the town beauty, now 42, has never appreciated any of it. She always complains about the smell of fish on me, saying it's the scent of the lower class. She likes to fill the house with overpowering perfumes, attend charity luncheons and book clubs, and chat about fashion and art with those wives who live off their husband's money. Jessica was the town beauty, and she's still well kept, dressed in elegant clothes, always trying to cover the unavoidable smell of fish in our house with strong perfumes. She goes out with flawless makeup, but at home, she's listless and impatient. She has a deep-seated class anxiety and insecurity, enjoying the comfortable life I provide while looking down on how I make my money and my blue-collar status. She naively believes she can climb the social ladder through a respectable lover. I didn't care about all that. For 15 years, I gave her everything she wanted, a spacious house, designer clothes, vacations, even sending our daughter to a fancy college up north. I thought it was enough until I started noticing the little things. The first clue was when Jessica started wearing a ridiculously expensive French perfume with a scent so strong it seemed like she was trying to hide something. It wasn't her usual style. She preferred things that were refined but understated. This perfume felt like a statement, and whenever she went out wearing it, she'd come back with a mix of scents, her perfume and a certain men's cologne I couldn't place. The second clue was that she suddenly put a password on her phone and always placed it face down. Jessica had never been one to value privacy. Her phone used to be all over the house with no restrictions between us. But now, she even took her phone into the bathroom when she showered, a behavior that raised my suspicions. One time, I caught her texting late at night, and when I walked over, she immediately turned off the screen and asked with forced casualness if I wanted a glass of water. This behavior was too strange for someone who didn't even use passwords before. The third clue was those charity events and book clubs, which became more and more frequent, going from once a month to once a week, and then 2 or 3 times a week. She always came back flushed, with an evasive look in her eyes and increasingly unbelievable explanations. Once, I accidentally overheard her on the phone saying in a low voice, "I told him I have my book club. I won't be home early." The excitement she failed to hide after hanging up made my heart sink, but what really put me on alert was a strange seafood order on our joint account. It was a batch of premium Gulf oysters and bluefin tuna belly, overpriced by 40% for a total of over $8,000. Anyone who knew the business would know this price was ridiculously high. And the most absurd part was that the delivery was for one Ethan Rivers, client relations manager at the Royal Marina Hotel. I know the head chef at that 5-star hotel, Eric. He's a strict professional who would never let outsiders interfere with his ingredient purchasing. So this wasn't a normal business transaction, it was some kind of scam. An instinct told me I needed more information. That's when finding the pearl earring became the final straw. I found it while cleaning out Jessica's car, tucked under the passenger seat. If I hadn't been specifically looking for the garage keys I'd dropped, I might never have found it. In that moment, I felt a strange calm, like when I inspect a fish at the market and know it's no longer fresh, no matter how shiny it looks on the outside. I decided to find Ray, my childhood friend, a former Marine Patrol officer who now runs a small bar on the docks called the Siren's Call. If there's anything in Port Charlotte that gets past me, it definitely won't get past Ray. His network of information covers everything from the fishing boats to the city offices. Ray is a lot like his bar, rough around the edges, laid back, but full of secrets. He's 46, a year older than me, with a stocky build and a beer belly. He always wears faded Hawaiian shirts, shorts, and sandals, looking like a tourist on vacation. But only those who know him know that beneath that coarse exterior lies a sharp mind and a loyal heart. He has a booming voice, a frank laugh, and loves to tell dirty jokes. But when it's time for action, he's reliable and sharp. The Siren's Call doesn't look like much, but among the dock workers and boat captains, it's an information hub. If you want to learn secrets, sit at Ray's bar for an evening, and you're bound to hear something useful. I chose to visit him on a Tuesday afternoon when the bar was nearly empty. Ray saw me walk in and grinned widely. Well, if it isn't the king of the wharf, what a rare sight. I didn't return his joke. I went straight to the bar and sat down. "Ray, I need a favor." Ray's smile faded slightly as he quickly picked up on my mood. "What's up, buddy? You look like you just ate a bad shrimp." "Let's talk in the back," I gestured. "This isn't for public discussion." Ray nodded, told the bartender to watch the front, and led me to his small back office. It was a good place, away from prying eyes, with photos from his Marine Patrol days and various certificates on the walls. He pulled a bottle of top-shelf tequila from a cabinet, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to me. "All right, what's got you so tense?" he asked. "Someone messing with your boat, or are people trying to move in on your territory at the market?" I shook my head, pulled the pearl earring from my pocket, and placed it on the table. Ray glanced at the earring, then at me, frowning. "What's this?" "Found it last night in Jessica's car," I said flatly. "It's not her style, and I didn't give it to her." Ray picked up the earring, examining it carefully under the light, and then whistled. "Nice piece. South Sea pearl, excellent quality. Market price is at least $500 for the pair." He looked up. "You suspect Jessica is cheating on you?" "It's more than a suspicion," I sighed, and told him about all the strange things I'd noticed, including the bizarre seafood order. "I need to know the truth, Ray. The whole truth." "Ethan Rivers," Ray smiled, showing his tobacco-stained teeth. "That pretentious jerk. The one who walks around the marina in a tie like he's got a golden stick up his ass." "You know him?" "Who doesn't?" Ray snorted with disdain. "The guy's been at the hotel for about 6 or 7 years, all thanks to his smooth talk and fancy suits. He spins lies everywhere he goes and has taken advantage of a lot of women behind the scenes. You know why that 5-star hotel keeps him? Because he speaks 6 languages and knows how to kiss the asses of rich tourists. They say he has a special talent for charming women." "Heard anything specific?" I asked, taking a sip of the liquor. Ray lowered his voice. "Last Christmas, there was a new girl at the hotel's front desk, Mariah, pretty as a flower. Ethan gave her a pair of expensive pearl earrings, yeah, just like this one, and in less than 2 weeks he had her in bed. When he got bored, he started avoiding her and even bragged about his conquest to his colleagues. The girl couldn't take it and quit. He paused and added, "The funny thing is, before she left, she sold the earrings to an American businessman staying there, saying they made her sick to look at. This guy has a habit of giving the same model of earrings to each new conquest. Apparently, he buys them in bulk, 10 pairs at a time, to save money. One performance, 10 sexual encounters. The guy is a sly one." My hand involuntarily clenched into a fist, my knuckles turning white. Ray noticed my anger and clapped me on the shoulder. "Easy, buddy. Rage won't solve anything. You want to know exactly what's going on, right? I can look into it." "I want to know every detail," I said calmly, though my voice carried an icy determination. "How long it's been going on, how much money is involved, who knows about it. I need concrete proof." "It could get ugly," Ray warned. "Are you prepared for that?" I smiled, but even to me it sounded strange. At the market, I deal with blood and guts every day. However horrible the truth is, it can't be worse than that. Ray nodded, pocketing the earring. "Give me 3 days. I've got people I can call." For the next 3 days, I kept up a semblance of normalcy. I was at the market by 5 a.m. and back home by 7 p.m. With Jessica, I remained the same quiet, punctual husband I'd always been. I watched her every move, noticing how she checked her phone more frequently, mentioned more charity events and book clubs. She even started working out and bought clothes she would never normally wear. They were all clear signs of an affair, but I said nothing. I just quietly collected these details, waiting for news from Ray. During this time, I also did my own investigating. I discreetly checked Jessica's credit card statements and found suspicious charges. Expensive lingerie stores, restaurants she'd never mentioned to me, even a spa at a luxury hotel. These weren't places Jessica had told me she frequented. Even stranger, some charges were clearly for 2 people, but she always said she was going with friends. I also noticed that Jessica had started changing her style of dress. She used to like elegant conservative clothes, but now she was buying outfits that were too youthful and revealing. She started going to beauty salons more often, dyeing her hair, getting manicures, facials, even small cosmetic injections. All these changes pointed in one direction. She was pleasing someone, and that someone wasn't me. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I got the call from Ray. "Come to the bar, I've got something to show you." His tone was serious, and I knew the news wasn't good. I closed my stall early, telling the employees they could head home. They looked at each other, but no one dared to ask why. At the market, there was only one reason for Owen to leave early. Something big was happening. Ray's bar was already closed, but the back door was ajar. I went in and found not only Ray, but also several people I didn't know. "Owen, over here," Ray called me over. "Let me introduce you. This is Chris, my nephew. He works in housekeeping at the Royal Marina. This is Martha, my cousin. She works at a jewelry store. And this is Eddie, my old classmate. He's at a bank now." I shook hands with all of them, already having a bad feeling. Ray wouldn't gather this many people without a reason, unless he'd discovered something major. "Sit down," Ray gestured. "We've got a lot to show you." On the table was a pile of photos, copies of bank statements, a notebook, and what looked like a lighter-shaped recording device. "Let's start with this," Ray said, pointing to the notebook. Chris found it while cleaning a suite on the hotel's 3rd floor. It had fallen under the bed. It's Ethan's personal log. I opened the notebook, and the first page made my blood pressure spike. It was a detailed diary of his conquests. Ethan had recorded every one of his victories, including dates, places, the women's names, and even disgusting personal ratings. Jessica's name appeared on multiple pages over the last 6 months, usually next to Room 206 and some vulgar comments I'd rather not repeat. But the most shocking part was the last few pages. There, he had detailed his business plan. How to use Jessica to get expensive seafood from me and then resell it, how to gradually drain my business, and there was even an estimate of the division of assets after our divorce, with entries like, boat estimated value $150,000. I closed the notebook silently, feeling an unprecedented calm. It wasn't the blind rage typical of someone who has been betrayed, but a lucid, calculating anger. I knew what I was going to do, and how to do it in the most thorough way. "That's not all," Ray said, pulling out a stack of photos. Martha found out that those earrings were indeed purchased by Ethan last Christmas, and it wasn't just one pair. He ordered 10 identical pairs from that jewelry store, claiming they were corporate gifts. What a cheap son of a bitch, I laughed coldly. One design, multiple uses. And, Eddie continued, taking his turn and pulling out a bank statement, according to what I found, over the last 6 months, your joint account has transferred nearly $30,000 to Ethan's personal account. On the surface, they were purchases of high-end seafood, but in reality, most of the money went into his pocket. How did they do it? I asked. Very simple, Eddie explained. Jessica used your name to place orders with the hotel, with prices inflated by 40%. Ethan would manipulate the accounts at the hotel, receiving only a small portion of the seafood, but recording the full delivery. The rest of the seafood they sold to other restaurants, and the difference went directly into Ethan's personal account, who would then give a cut to Jessica. Did Jessica know all this? Not only did she know, Ray hesitated for a moment, it seems she was the mastermind. Here's an email she sent to Ethan, he pointed to a printed document, where she plans how to get the largest possible share of your assets, specifically mentioning your boat. I took the email and read the words my wife had written to her lover. Dearest Ethan, the lawyer says if I can prove Owen has been emotionally neglectful for a long time, I'll be able to get half the assets in the divorce, including his boat. The Pearl is worth $150,000, and when we sell it, we'll have enough money to open that restaurant in the Keys. Just hang in there for a few more months, and once I have the money, we can leave this smelly place forever. Love you always, Jessica. I put down the letter, the rage in my heart turning to ice. This wasn't just a simple betrayal, it was a meticulously planned conspiracy to destroy everything I had built with my own hands. Looks like we need a thorough plan, I said calmly. We can't alert them, but they can't get away unpunished either. You're right, Ray nodded. It's not enough to have evidence, we also need a perfect execution strategy. Chris suddenly chimed in. I've noticed at the hotel that they meet every Wednesday at 4 p.m. at Warehouse 18 on the old pier. I guess that's where they exchange the goods and money. Ray's eyes lit up. That gives us an excellent opportunity. Owen, I've got an idea. Ray's plan was clever and simple. He would pose as a flashy new money type from up north, interested in the high-end seafood supply chain, to tempt Ethan into showing his true colors. Meanwhile, I would gather the final pieces of evidence for the final judgment. The next day, Ray started preparing his character. He found an exaggerated floral shirt, put on thick gold chains and a fake watch, and even splashed on the same cheap aftershave that Ethan used. His acting skills were always top-notch. Back in the Marine Patrol, he often went undercover to catch smugglers. How do I look? Do I look like new money? Ray spun around, asking me with a laugh. Perfect, I said. No one will doubt your identity. Ray also made another preparation. He borrowed a special recorder pen from an old friend at the police station. It looked like a normal lighter, but could record 4 hours of high-definition audio. It's the latest model, he said proudly. It can pick up the buzz of a mosquito. Our operation began on Wednesday afternoon. Ray, dressed extravagantly, showed up pretending to be drunk in the hotel lobby, shouting that he was looking for someone to introduce him to the best local seafood supplier, saying he wanted to open a luxury restaurant in town. Ethan, just as we expected, quickly approached him, presenting himself as someone who knew the best special channels. They agreed to meet at Warehouse 18 on the old pier, a place far from the public eye, perfect for illicit transactions. By 3:30, Ray and I were already waiting in an old cargo van outside Warehouse 18. Ray was dressed like a rich businessman, complete with sunglasses and a wig, while I hid in the driver's seat, watching through the rearview mirror. At 4 o'clock sharp, a black BMW slowly pulled up and stopped in front of the warehouse. Ethan got out of the car, looked around, and went inside. It was the first time I'd seen this man up close, the one who stole my wife and my money. He was about 38, quite a bit younger than me, tall and thin, almost looking underfed, as if he was on some extreme diet to maintain his figure. His hair was perfectly coiffed, sprayed with cheap but strong-smelling hairspray. He wore a suit that looked expensive but didn't fit him right, walking with his chest puffed out and head held high with an air of superiority. I had to admit, on the surface, He had the qualities that might attract women like Jessica, a veneer of sophistication and a city slicker vibe. "Your turn, old friend," I clapped Ray on the shoulder. "Remember, record everything." Ray nodded, pulling what looked like an ordinary lighter from his pocket. "The latest version of the recorder. Can record continuously for 4 hours. An old friend from the station lent it to me." He got out of the van, sticking out his beer belly, and walked with exaggerated steps toward the warehouse. I watched the whole process through the rearview mirror. Ray knocked on the door, spoke with someone inside, and was then invited in. For the next hour, I could only hear occasional bursts of laughter coming from the warehouse. Finally, Ray came out, staggering a bit, with a satisfied smile on his face. As soon as he got in the van, I asked anxiously, "How did it go?" "Total success," Ray patted his chest pocket. "This guy is a complete idiot. I just told him I was a new investor from New York, looking for seafood suppliers through gray channels, and he spilled everything. Not only did he admit to stealing your goods, but he bragged about how he's sleeping with your wife." "What exactly did he say?" Ray hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure you want to hear it? It's not very decent." "I need to know everything," I said, "even the dirtiest parts." Ray sighed, took out the recorder, and pressed the play button. Ethan's voice came out of the small device. "That woman? Ha! Her husband's an idiot. Spends all day hauling fish at the market, doesn't even know his wife is cheating on him. I just have to buy her a few cheap trinkets, and she spreads her legs. She even helps me get seafood from her husband. You know what the funniest part is? She thinks I love her. She's even planning to divorce him and live with me. Poor stupid woman. I just need her as a cheap supplier and a free lay. She's got this fishy smell that won't go away no matter how much perfume she uses. Every time I have to kiss her, I have to stop myself from throwing up." The recording continued, with Ethan describing his business model in detail, how he used Jessica to get expensive seafood from me and then sell it at a low price to other restaurants, with the difference going directly into his personal accounts. He even mentioned his long-term plan to run off with the money once Jessica got the assets from the divorce. "You know what? That stupid woman doesn't understand anything." Ethan's voice was full of contempt. "She thinks we're going to open a restaurant in the Keys, but I've actually already bought a house in Brazil. As soon as I get the money, I'll disappear, and she won't even be able to find my shadow." I turned off the recording, took a deep breath, and felt something inside me cool and solidify, turning into a hard core. "That's enough," I said calmly, no emotion in my voice. "I know everything I needed to know." Ray looked at me with a seriousness I rarely saw on his face. "What are you going to do?" "Now, we're going to draw up a detailed plan," I said, my gaze determined, "a plan that will make them pay the ultimate price." Over the next 2 days, I carefully prepared my judgment plan. First, I contacted a lawyer Ray recommended, a sharp and efficient woman who helped me draft a divorce agreement, ensuring Jessica wouldn't get a single penny after the divorce. Then, I rented a cheap apartment on the west side of town, paid 3 months' deposit, and got the keys. At the same time, I didn't forget about Ethan. I contacted the general manager of the Royal Marina Hotel, James, a longtime client who always bought seafood from me for large banquets. "Owen, my old friend," James greeted me warmly. "What brings you here? It's not delivery day." "James, I have something important to tell you," I said seriously, "about your client relations manager, Ethan." James's expression immediately turned serious. "What's wrong? Did he get into trouble?" "More than trouble," I said, showing him all the evidence I had, bank records, recordings, copies of Ethan's journal. "He's embezzling funds by abusing his position, defrauding the hotel and clients, and even sexually harassing female employees." James's face grew darker and darker, and when he finished listening to the recording, he almost slammed his fist on the table. "That bastard! I always suspected there were problems with the accounts, but I never imagined he was this brazen. Owen, thank you for telling me this. Ethan will be fired today, and we will be filing a police report." "You're welcome," I stood up, smiling. "I've always believed that in business you have to be honest, right?" After leaving the hotel, I went to my stall at the market and took out several fish from the freezer that had been there for a few days and some seafood that was starting to go bad. These would normally be discarded, but now they had a better use. I put them in a large styrofoam box and then left it in a warm storage room for another day, making sure they would emit the most putrid smell possible. The third preparation was the most important. I secretly installed several hidden cameras in the living room, kitchen, and master bedroom. This wasn't to spy on her privacy, but to collect more evidence in case Jessica later falsely accused me of domestic violence or other baseless charges. In divorce cases, this is a common tactic, and I needed to protect myself. Finally, I went back home and got everything ready. I sent a message to Jessica saying I would be working very late at the docks and not to wait up for me. Then, I turned off all the lights, leaving only a single bare white bulb on in the kitchen. On the table, I placed the huge white styrofoam box next to a bottle of top-shelf bourbon I had saved for years and 2 clean glasses. It was a trap. I knew Jessica could never resist good liquor. Then, I sat in the darkness, waiting for the prey to fall into the trap. At 11:30, the front door finally opened. Jessica came in, reeking of that piercing perfume mixed with the post-coital scent and the cheap aftershave Ethan used. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her eye makeup a bit smudged. She had clearly just had an intense activity. "Owen," she called out, feigning surprise, "why are you sitting in the dark?" "Waiting for you," I said quietly, no emotion in my voice. "How was the book club?" She stepped into the light, and I saw a shadow of unease cross her face, but it was quickly replaced by a confident smile. "Oh, a bunch of old ladies discussing literature. So boring." She came closer, trying to kiss my cheek, but I subtly avoided the contact. "Really?" I asked, smiling. "That's strange, because today the organizer of your club, Maria, told me the meeting was canceled. She told me this afternoon when she bought fish at my stall." Jessica's smile froze, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I meant another book club, the one organized by Martha. You don't know her?" "Of course," I nodded, pointing to the styrofoam box on the table. "I brought you a gift." "A gift?" She smiled forcedly, walking closer. "What kind of gift is kept in a foam box?" "Open it, and you'll find out." She hesitated for a moment, as if she sensed something was wrong, but eventually, curiosity won over caution. She approached the box and carefully lifted the lid. In that instant, a disgusting stench filled the room. The smell of the rotten seafood I had left in the box for 3 days, mixed with the odor of stale fish and the ammonia of decaying shellfish. Jessica immediately recoiled, covering her nose, her face pale. "What the hell is this?" she yelled, her voice filled with disgust. "This is our marriage," I said calmly, rising from the darkness and stepping into the light. "Rotten from the inside out, just like this seafood, shiny on the outside but completely decomposed within." I pulled out a waterproof bag from under the box containing the photos and bank statements Ray had given me. I spread them on the table, one by one, methodically, as if I were sorting fish at the market. "This is a photo of you and Ethan in the hotel's service hallway. This is one of you in his car. This is the proof of your embezzlement. This is your email, planning the divorce and taking my assets. And this is Ethan's journal, where he records in detail every one of your dates, every betrayal." My voice remained calm, as if I were commenting on the weather. Jessica went from shocked to pure white. She tried to say something, but I raised my hand to interrupt her. "And this," I said, taking out the recorder and pressing the play button. Ethan's voice, insulting her, echoed in the silent kitchen. As the recording played, Jessica's expression went from shock to humiliation, then to anger, and finally to a deep fear of betrayal. "He couldn't have said that," she said, trembling. "He loves me. He told me we would live together. He said I was the most special woman he had ever met." "Really?" I laughed coldly. "It seems you two make a perfect pair, 2 liars. The difference is, he deceived you, and the 2 of you together deceived me." Jessica slumped into a chair, tears starting to fall, but I knew they weren't tears of remorse, but of shame and anger at being caught. "Owen, I can explain," she started to say, but I cut her off. "I don't need explanations," I said coldly. "From now on, you have 2 options." I took a document from my briefcase and placed it in front of her. "First, sign this divorce agreement, take your personal belongings, and get out of this house immediately. Under the agreement, you won't receive a single cent, because I have enough proof of your marital infidelity and misappropriation of assets. If you want to go to court, I will present all this evidence to the judge, including these photos and recordings." Jessica glanced at the document, her expression growing darker. "This is excessive. I should at least get half the house. I've dedicated 15 years to this family." "Dedication?" I laughed, a laugh without warmth. "You betrayed me, stole my money, and even planned to take my boat. You call that dedication? I'm just taking back what belongs to me." "What's the second option?" She lifted her head with defiance in her eyes. "The second option," I said slowly, "is for you to work at my stall for minimum wage until you pay back all the money you stole. Every last cent." "Work? In that stinking fish market?" She looked at me as if I had proposed she live on Mars. "You know how much I hate that place, those smells, those people." "Precisely," I said. "It's the most fitting punishment for you. You will learn to respect those who earn a living with their hands, to respect those inferior jobs you've always looked down on." I took a key from my pocket and placed it on the table. "This is the key to a cheap apartment on the west side of town. If you choose to leave, you can stay there temporarily until you find another man willing to support you. But remember, Ethan has already been fired from the hotel, and he will soon face a criminal investigation." "What?" Jessica lifted her head in surprise. "What investigation?" "Oh, I spoke with the hotel's general manager today. I showed him some evidence proving how Ethan abused his position to embezzle funds. They've frozen his accounts and filed a police report." Jessica's face completely changed, as if she had aged 10 years in an instant. She knew her carefully planned future had crumbled. "And if I don't accept either option?" She tried to stand tall, but there was no firmness left in her voice. Then I took out my phone, showing a number already dialed. "I will immediately call the police and report you for embezzlement and commercial fraud. Under Florida law, these types of crimes can carry a prison sentence of 3 to 7 years. Jessica's face turned white as a sheet. She knew I wasn't bluffing. The good-natured, hard-working husband she knew had disappeared, replaced by a cold, relentless stranger. "Give me a night to think about it," she finally said in a low voice. "No," I replied sharply. "You decide now. I've already shown you far more mercy than you deserve." She remained silent for a long time, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, and finally spoke in a trembling voice. "I choose to work." "Smart decision," I nodded. "Be at the docks tomorrow at 6 a.m. Tom will tell you what to do. If you're 1 minute late, the agreement automatically takes effect, and you will lose the right to enter this house forever." I turned to leave the kitchen, but stopped at the door and looked back. "Oh, one more thing. I'll be sleeping in the guest room. You can continue to use the master bedroom, but I've changed all the locks and passwords. Don't try to contact anyone, especially not Ethan. Remember, every step you take is now being watched." That night, lying in the guest room bed, I heard Jessica crying in the master bedroom. It wasn't genuine remorse, but the pain of being forced to accept reality. I knew she was weighing different options, trying to find a way out, but what she didn't know was that I had already blocked all the exits. At 5 a.m., I got up, showered, and put on my work clothes. When I came out of the room, I found that Jessica was also up and making coffee in the kitchen. She was wearing a relatively simple blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her makeup was much lighter than usual. "You're ready," I commented. "At least that surprises me." "I said I would go," she said in a low voice. "I'll keep my promise." "Like you kept your wedding vows?" I laughed with disdain. "Don't think this is a chance for redemption, Jessica. This is just you paying off your debts." We walked out the door, each taking our own car to the docks. On the way, I called Tom, telling him a special employee was coming in today and to prepare the most difficult batch of fish for her. "This batch just came in yesterday. It's a little old. Perfect for her to process. Make sure to put her in the most visible spot where everyone can see her." Tom chuckled on the other end of the phone. "Got it, boss. I'll take good care of her." When I got to the docks, I was surprised to see Jessica already waiting in front of my stall. Her eyes were swollen. She clearly hadn't slept all night, but she stood straight, with a determination I had rarely seen in her. "You came," I said. "Very punctual." "I had no choice," she said in a low voice, a complex emotion in her gaze. "Everyone has choices, Jessica," I smiled, opening the metal gate of the stall. You chose betrayal. Now you have to face the consequences." I led her inside the stall, pointing to a large pile of assorted fish that had just been unloaded. "Today your job is to sort these fish, scale them, gut them, and then stack them neatly. Tom will show you how." I deliberately placed her in the most visible spot in the market where everyone could see her. Tom quickly appeared, handing Jessica an apron stained with fish blood and a scaling knife. He glanced at Jessica, then at me, with a complex expression, and began to briefly show her how to proceed. "First, separate the fish by species," Tom said, demonstrating the movements. "Then use this knife from the tail against the direction of the scales. The pressure should be even, not too hard, or you'll damage the fish meat." Jessica tried to do as he said, but the first fish gave her a welcome, sending scales flying onto her face and clothes. She cried out in surprise, almost dropping the knife. "Don't be so delicate," Tom said impatiently. "They're just fish scales, not poison. Keep going." Jessica bit her lip, forcing herself to continue, but the real challenge was yet to come: gutting the fish. When Tom showed her how to slice open the fish's belly and pull out the entrails, Jessica's face turned pale. "You want me to stick my hand in there?" she asked incredulously. "What else?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "With telepathy? This is the most basic job, Mrs. Miller. People do it every day, including your husband, the one you always said smelled like fish." Jessica looked at me, and I could see the rage and humiliation in her eyes, but she didn't back down. She took a deep breath, stuck her hand into the fish's belly, and immediately gagged. "The first time, everyone reacts like this," Tom said without sympathy. "You'll get used to it. You have 50 fish to process today." And so began Jessica's labor reform. At first, she was clumsy, every movement filled with resistance and disgust. But over time, sheer survival instinct forced her to adapt. She learned to hold the knife correctly, to scale fish quickly, to pull out the entrails in one go. But the hardest part wasn't the work itself, but the reaction of the people around her. "Isn't that Jessica Miller?" a woman who sold vegetables asked in surprise. "Owen's wife. What is she doing?" "Gutting fish," another vendor laughed. "I thought her hands were only good for holding credit cards." As time went on, more and more people noticed this new employee. Some just watched with curiosity, others pointed without hiding it, and some even came over, pretending to buy fish, but really wanting to get a closer look at this fallen lady. "Hey, Jessica," said a woman who had been a waitress at one of her charity luncheons, feigning surprise. "What a surprise to see you here. Finally decided to learn about your husband's work?" Jessica forced a smile, but I could see her hands were shaking. Her pride was being crushed, piece by piece, just as she had crushed mine before. At noon, Ray deliberately showed up at the market, saying loudly, "Hey, Owen, they say Ethan has been arrested by the police. They found out he was embezzling funds and is involved in commercial fraud. They say he could spend several years in prison." Jessica's hand trembled, dropping a fish. I could see the fear on her face. Her escape routes were disappearing one by one. "Oh, isn't this Jessica?" Ray pretended to just notice her. "What are you doing here? A new hobby?" "She's working," I replied calmly. "Paying off what she owes me." Ray nodded exaggeratedly. "Wise choice. Better than working in jail." Jessica lowered her head, saying nothing, just mechanically continuing her work. But I noticed her movements had become rougher, as if she were venting her emotions. In the afternoon, the situation became more dramatic. Ethan himself appeared at the market, looking exhausted, disheveled, with bloodshot eyes, none of his usual arrogance left. He looked around, and soon spotted Jessica scaling fish. "Jessica!" he shouted, running toward our stall. "I need to talk to you. They've frozen my accounts. I could go to prison." The people in the market stopped to watch the show. Jessica looked up, her expression changing from shock to anger. "You dare to come here? After what you said?" "What did I say?" Ethan asked, confused. I stepped forward, took out the recorder, and in front of everyone pressed the play button. Ethan's voice insulting Jessica echoed throughout the market. Everyone heard him call Jessica a stupid woman with a fishy smell, how he planned to use her and then abandon her. The market erupted in snickers and boos. Ethan's face turned pale, stammering as he tried to explain. "Jessica, I didn't mean it. It was to fool that investor. I love you." "Get out!" Jessica's voice trembled, gripping the scaling knife tightly, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Get out and never let me see you again." Ethan looked around at the furious glares, then at the knife in Jessica's hand, and finally fled, accompanied by the boos and jeers of the market. When Ethan disappeared into the crowd, Jessica turned to me, a complex expression on her face, a mix of anger, humiliation, and something I couldn't identify. "Satisfied?" she asked in a low voice, bitterness in her tone. "Are you happy to see us both humiliated?" I didn't answer immediately, just looked at her, at this woman who was once on top, now covered in fishy smells and scales, standing in the place she had always despised, surrounded by people watching and commenting on her. "This isn't about my satisfaction," I finally replied. "It's about consequences. Every choice has consequences, Jessica. You chose betrayal. Now you face the consequences." She lowered her eyes as if she suddenly understood something, and then silently returned to work. This time, her movements became more skillful, more focused, as if she were using the work to escape from reality. That night, when the market closed, Jessica's hands were already full of cuts and blisters, her clothes completely ruined, stained with scales and guts. But strangely, she didn't complain, just silently completed all the work. 6 o'clock tomorrow, I said briefly before leaving. "Don't be late." She nodded, looking at me with a complex expression, and then walked away, dragging her tired body toward the bus stop. The following days became Jessica's period of labor reform. Every morning at 6, she appeared punctually at the stall, no matter the weather or how tired she was. She learned to properly handle various types of seafood, to communicate with customers, to identify the freshest fish. Each day, I assigned her different tasks, making sure she experienced all aspects of working at the market. On Tuesday, she was responsible for cleaning and organizing the lobster tank. On Wednesday, she had to spend the whole day in the freezer sorting frozen fish. On Thursday, she helped with unloading, carrying heavy boxes of fish from the truck to the stall. On Friday, she cleaned the entire floor and equipment of the stall. Each task was more exhausting, dirtier, and more challenging than the last. But to my surprise, she never complained, simply completing everything in silence. Maybe because she knew it was her only way out, or maybe because she finally understood how desperate her situation was. One day, I deliberately assigned her to process a newly arrived batch of sharks. This is the dirtiest and most exhausting job on the docks, which normally no one wants to do. Shark skin is so rough it can scrape human skin. The smell of blood is so strong it can make you nauseous, and shark meat must be processed in a very short time, or it will spoil. "Today you're in charge of this batch of sharks," I pointed to the huge beasts in the corner, telling Jessica. "They all need to be processed before noon." Jessica looked at the sharks, her face paling, but she didn't back down. "What tools do I need?" she asked calmly. I pointed to the nearby tool rack. "The shark knife is there, the gloves too. Be careful, shark skin can cut you easily." All morning, Jessica struggled with those sharks. Her arms were cut several times by the shark skin, her clothes and apron were soaked in shark blood, but she didn't stop to rest, not even to ask for help. When noon arrived, all the sharks had been processed, neatly arranged on ice. "Well done," I commented, somewhat surprised by her efficiency and determination. "I didn't expect you to do it so well." Jessica lifted her head, a strange glint in her eyes. "Did you think I would give up?" she asked, a challenging tone in her voice. "I'm not that easy to defeat, Owen." It was the first time she had directly challenged me since her punishment. I had to admit I admired her tenacity. "Good," I nodded. "Tomorrow's task will be harder." The most obvious change was in her appearance and character. Her elegant manicure was gone, replaced by rough hands and broken nails. She no longer wore those expensive perfumes, because in the market, any scent would be overpowered by the smell of fish. Her clothing became simple and practical, no longer those brand-name garments unsuitable for work. More importantly, her gaze changed. The old arrogance and disdain were gone, replaced by a complex emotion I couldn't define. Perhaps resignation, perhaps an awakening, or perhaps just extreme exhaustion. On the evening of the 7th day, as the market was about to close, I noticed Jessica receive a text message. She discreetly looked at it and then quickly deleted it, but I had already seen the sender's name, Ethan. I said nothing, just made a mental note. An instinct told me the game wasn't over yet. That night I pretended to go for a drink with Ray, but I was actually watching from a cafe across from the cheap apartment building. Sure enough, at 9 o'clock, a taxi pulled up in front of the building, and Ethan got out. He looked around, making sure no one noticed him, and then quickly entered the building. "What are you plotting now?" I murmured, calling Ray. "They're meeting at the apartment. Plan B, now." Half an hour later, Ray arrived in a car with 2 uniformed police officers. Together, we went up the stairs and stopped in front of Jessica's apartment door. We could hear low voices and rustling noises from inside. Ray knocked on the door. "Police, open up!" Silence inside, then hurried footsteps. I nodded, and Ray signaled for the officers to break down the door. The scene inside was just as I expected. Jessica and Ethan, with documents and a map spread out on the table, what looked like some kind of escape plan. Most importantly, on the table was a key, the key to my boat, which should have been locked in the safe in my house. "What's going on here?" Ray feigned surprise. "Jessica Miller, Ethan Rivers, what are you planning?" Ethan was the first to react. "Officer, this is just a private meeting, nothing illegal." "Really?" Ray picked up the key from the table. "This key looks familiar. Owen, isn't this the key to your boat?" I nodded. "Yes, the key to the Pearl. It should be in my safe at home." I turned to Jessica. "How did you get it?" Jessica turned pale, speechless. Ethan tried to make an excuse. "It must be a misunderstanding. We were just talking about—" "Talking about what?" Ray interrupted, pointing to the map on the table. "About how to steal Owen's boat. About how to flee Port Charlotte." The 2 police officers began to search the apartment and soon found a large sum of cash, passports, and some jewelry in Jessica's suitcase, including a necklace my mother had left for my daughter. "Theft and attempted robbery," one officer said. "We need both of you to come to the station for questioning." As they were being led away, Jessica finally exploded. "You set me up. You've been watching me." "No," I said quietly. "I just know you well, just like I know seafood. It might look fresh on the outside, but inside, it's already started to rot." Watching them get into the patrol car, I felt a strange peace. It wasn't the end, but a new beginning. The police investigation was more thorough than I expected. With Ray's help, they not only found evidence of Jessica and Ethan's plan to steal my boat, but they also dug up more evidence of financial fraud. It turned out this wasn't their first time collaborating. Ethan had used similar tactics before to defraud the hotel and other suppliers. Even more shocking, they uncovered a larger network, a group of scammers who specifically targeted wealthy men. Ethan was in charge of identifying targets, usually wealthy but unhappy women in their marriages. Jessica was one of the intermediaries, using her social circles to introduce more potential victims. And the real mastermind was a real estate agent named Morales, who was responsible for turning the profits from the scam into cash and overseas assets. The results of the investigation shook all of Port Charlotte. Several newspapers covered the case, calling it the Port Charlotte scam. Ethan and Morales were sentenced to long prison terms for multiple counts of fraud, while Jessica received a lighter sentence for cooperating with the investigation. 3 years of probation, plus hefty fines and restitution. After her probation sentence, Jessica had to report weekly to a community service center. She was assigned to clean up trash on the public beaches, precisely where she used to sip cocktails with her friends and brag about her luxurious life. Now, she had to bend over to pick up the trash left by tourists under the scorching sun in full view of everyone. Most importantly, the divorce was quickly finalized within a week, with the court completely on my side. She received no division of assets. The judge, after seeing the evidence, strongly condemned Jessica's actions, calling them the most egregious marital betrayal and attempted asset transfer he had ever seen. But I wasn't completely satisfied yet. I knew that for people like Jessica, the loss of money isn't the most painful thing. The most painful thing is the loss of dignity, the shame of not being able to hold her head high in this town where she had lived most of her life. So on the day Ethan and Morales were imprisoned, I organized a huge seafood festival in the center of the market. I invited the whole town, including all the high society friends Jessica used to show off to. The reason for the celebration? To celebrate honest work and true friendship. Everyone came with curiosity and a desire to gossip. I hired a local band, offered free seafood and beer. Everyone was talking about the Port Charlotte scam, discussing the names that were revealed, thanking God they weren't involved. During the event, I saw many of Jessica's former friends. These people who once toasted at her charity luncheons now avoided her like the plague. When I asked about Jessica, they just shook their heads, saying they no longer had contact with her. "She's not one of us," one woman said coldly. "She never was." Inside, I knew these people weren't much better than Jessica, but at that moment, their coldness and rejection were precisely the greatest punishment for her. Then, at the climax of the event, I stood on an improvised stage and raised my glass. "Thank you all for coming today. I want to take this opportunity to announce some news." The crowd quieted down, everyone waiting expectantly for what I was going to say. "First, I want to thank you for your support of my business all these years. It's thanks to you that my stall has become the pride of the market." Applause. "Second, I want to announce that from today on, my fishing boat will be renamed Freedom." More applause. Finally, I paused, looking around, making sure everyone was listening. "I want to say that sometimes the people we think are closest to us can be the very ones least worthy of our trust. But Port Charlotte has taught me that true friends will stand by you in your darkest moments." I raised my glass, gesturing toward Ray. "To true friendship. To a new life." The crowd erupted in cheers, everyone toasting. In a corner, I saw Jessica standing alone, isolated and lost, with no one wanting to go near her. The social circle she was once so proud of had completely excluded her. Later that night, as the celebration was winding down, Jessica approached me. She looked much more haggard, the pride in her eyes gone, replaced by an indescribable weariness. "I'm leaving Port Charlotte," she said in a low voice, "to a small town down south where no one knows me." "Good decision," I nodded. "You've won, Owen," she said with a bitter smile. "You've completely destroyed me." "No," I shook my head. "You destroyed yourself. I just revealed the truth." She bit her lip, as if she wanted to say something else, but in the end, she just nodded and turned away. I watched her disappear into the darkness, feeling a strange relief, as if I had finally shed a heavy burden. A month after everything was over, I received a package sent from a small fishing village in the south. It contained Jessica's wedding ring and a note. "You were right. I made the wrong choice in life. No apologies, no requests, just a simple acknowledgement. For me, it was enough." As for Ethan, his fate was worse than I imagined. In prison, he quickly got into trouble for his big mouth. I heard he got 3 broken ribs and a broken leg, having to spend a month in the infirmary. The rules in prison are simple. Con artists and traitors are the least welcome. Ethan learned this lesson in the first week, when he tried to use his smooth talk to win over his fellow inmates and only received fists and kicks. There's an unwritten rule in prison. Men who deceive women receive the harshest punishments. Many prisoners have mothers, sisters, wives who support them from the outside, and they don't tolerate any behavior that harms women. Ethan's story soon spread throughout the prison, making him a target for everyone. Worse still, Ethan's former cellmate was a big guy nicknamed Bear, imprisoned for robbery and assault. Bear especially hated scammers and swore to make every day of Ethan's life in prison a living hell. They say Ethan tried to apply for solitary confinement, but the guards rejected him. "You deserve it, pretty boy," one guard sneered. "The path you chose, you have to walk it even if you have to crawl." Ethan spent 3 difficult years in prison. When he got out, he'd become a completely different person. Haggard, with an empty gaze, no trace of his former arrogance. He couldn't find a decent job. All the hotel managers knew him. All the restaurant owners had heard his story. When I heard that Ethan had gotten out of prison, I made a special trip to the tourist area to see how he was doing. I barely recognized him. The once proud man had become a hunched shadow with a vacant look in his eyes. He couldn't find a decent job and finally could only dress up in a ridiculous lobster costume, handing out flyers for a low-end seafood restaurant in the tourist area. Watching him sweat under the scorching sun, being mocked by tourists, I remembered the old saying, "Some people who pretend to be decent have hearts dirtier than anyone." Morales' real estate empire completely collapsed, all his assets frozen and auctioned off to compensate the victims. They say he tried to commit suicide twice in prison, but the guards found him in time. Jessica did indeed go south, opening a small seafood stall in a fishing village. According to fishermen who pass through there, she cooks delicious fish because she knows how to select the freshest ingredients. She never talks about the past, but when someone asks her how she knows so much about seafood, she just says, "I was once married to the sea, and only later did I understand its value." As for me, life goes on. My business grew. Freedom came back almost every day with a full load. I renovated the house, removing all traces of Jessica, as completely as cleaning the guts from a fish. My daughter Pearl came back from college to visit me, and when I told her the whole story, she just hugged me silently, saying, "Dad, you did the right thing. She didn't deserve to be my mother." Pearl is a smart girl, now studying marine biology at a university. Since she was little, she was curious about the ocean, often going out with me on the boat, helping me identify different species of fish. She inherited my love for the sea, but not Jessica's vanity and superficiality. I'm proud of her. A year later, on a Saturday afternoon, Ray and I were sitting by the docks drinking cold beer, watching the fishing boats return to port. "I hear you're expanding the stall," Ray raised his bottle. "Congratulations, King of the Wharf." "That corner of the market was always my goal," I nodded. "Finally got it." "Seen any new faces lately?" Ray asked suddenly, a mischievous look in his eyes. "Pearl says she has a pretty professor she wants to introduce you to." I laughed, shaking my head. "Right now, I just want to focus on the business." "You're not thinking of getting married again?" I looked out at the distant sea, where the sun danced on the water like countless shimmering diamonds. "On the docks, the most experienced hunter knows when to go out to sea and when to stay on shore," I finally replied. "Right now, I just want to enjoy this freedom." Ray nodded as if he understood and took another sip of beer. In the distance, my boat was slowly entering the harbor, the waves glistening on the bow and the new name shining under the sun. Freedom. Just then, I saw a familiar figure, Ethan, in that ridiculous lobster costume, handing out flyers to tourists. When he turned around, our eyes met. For an instant, we looked at each other, and in his eyes, I saw a flash of shame and fear. Then he quickly lowered his head, pretending not to have seen me, and continued with his work. I didn't mock him, nor did I approach him to humiliate him. The revenge was already complete. There was no need to rub more salt in the wound. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, but letting them see how well you're doing. As the old fishermen in Port Charlotte say, the shrimp doesn't know its own back is bent, so the crab makes fun of it for walking sideways. Everyone has their own destiny, and I chose freedom.